Eleander Harrington gripped the steering wheel of his black Bentley so tightly his knuckles turned white. The mansion gates had barely closed behind Elias Thorne when Elio made the decision he had been fighting for months. Tonight he would follow him. For 10 years Elias had been more than a butler. He had been the steady heartbeat of the household, the one person who never asked for anything, never complained, never looked at Elio with anything but quiet respect. Yet lately something had shifted. Elias left earlier some evenings, returned later others, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. Elio told himself it was concern. Deep down he knew it was fear. Fear that Elias had finally found someone else to give his loyalty to. The city lights of Seattle blurred past as Elias's modest silver sedan wove through downtown traffic. Elio kept 3 cars between them, heart hammering every time a light turned red. When Elias exited toward the south side, the glittering towers gave way to tired strip malls and rain-stained brick buildings. Elio's stomach twisted. This was not the world he knew. Elias pulled into a narrow street lined with aging apartment complexes. He parked in front of a 3-story walk-up that looked one strong wind away from needing major repairs. Elio killed the engine half a block away, watching as Elias climbed the steps carrying a paper grocery bag and a small backpack. The man moved with the same measured grace he used when serving dinner, as if dignity were something he carried in his bones. Elio waited 5 minutes, then slipped out of the car. He felt ridiculous, billionaire CEO skulking in the shadows like a jealous teenager, but he couldn't turn back now. He crossed the street, climbed the stairs quietly, and stopped outside apartment 3B. The door was thin. Voices drifted through. "And you finished the math homework?" Elias's tone was gentle, patient. "Yeah, it sucked, but I did it." A younger voice, male, maybe late teens or early 20s. "Good. That's what matters. Consistency." Elio's pulse roared in his ears. He pressed closer, peering through the narrow gap where the door didn't quite meet the frame. Inside, the living room was small but clean. A second-hand sofa, a coffee table covered in textbooks, a single lamp casting soft light. Elias was kneeling in front of a young man seated on the couch. The kid, because he still looked like a kid, had dark hair and tired eyes that reminded Elio of someone. Elias reached out and ruffled the boy's hair with a tenderness Elio had never seen. "You're doing great, Matteo," Elias said. "I'm proud of you." Matteo leaned forward and hugged Elias hard. "Thanks for not giving up on me." Elio's knees nearly buckled. He stepped back, hand over his mouth. He had come expecting to find betrayal. A lover, a secret family, something that would justify the ache he carried every time Elias smiled at someone else. Instead he found this. A quiet act of mercy that made everything he owned feel suddenly hollow. He stumbled down the stairs, vision blurring. By the time he reached his car he was crying silent, ugly tears that shook his shoulders. He didn't cry because he was jealous. He cried because he finally understood why Elias never asked for more money, never took vacations, never complained about the long hours. Every extra dollar had been going here. The next morning Elio woke with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring at the city he had conquered, and felt nothing but shame. He had spent years building walls around his heart, around his identity, around the truth. His board of directors included old-money conservatives who still referred to the gay agenda in private emails. His public image was carefully curated. Single, driven, untouchable. Coming out would cost him partnerships, stock value, maybe even the company itself. So he stayed silent. And Elias had stayed silent too. Elio called in sick for the first time in a decade. Then he drove back to the south side. He didn't knock right away. He sat in the car for nearly an hour, watching the building, rehearsing words he didn't know how to say. When he finally climbed the stairs, his hand shook as he raised it to the door. Elias opened it wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans, hair still damp from the shower. Surprise flashed across his face. Then concern. "Mr. Harrington? Is everything all right?" Elio swallowed. "May I come in?" Elias stepped aside without hesitation. The apartment smelled of coffee and fresh laundry. Mateo was at the kitchen table, headphones on, studying. He glanced up, eyes widening when he recognized Elio. Elias gestured toward the couch. "Please, sit." Elio sat. He looked around. At the patched walls, the mismatched dishes, the single-framed photo on the shelf. It was Elias and Mateo at a park, both smiling. No one else. "I followed you last night," Elio said quietly. "I saw you with him." Elias's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed. "I figured you might, eventually. You didn't try to hide it." "There's nothing to hide. Mateo is my nephew, my sister's son. She didn't take it well when he came out. Kicked him out at 17. I've been taking care of him since." Elio stared at the floor. "And you never told me. You never asked about my life outside these walls." Elias's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. "I didn't think it was relevant to polishing silver and folding your shirts." The words landed like a slap. Elio flinched. "I'm sorry." Elias exhaled slowly. "You don't owe me an apology, sir. You pay me well. I do my job." "But you're doing more than your job," Elio said. "You're raising a kid on a butler's salary. You're paying for his school, his books, his everything. And you never once asked me for help." Elias looked at him, then really looked at him. "I didn't want your pity, and I didn't want to risk my position. Mateo needed stability. I couldn't afford to lose this job." Elio felt the tears coming again. He stood abruptly. "I need air." He walked out without another word, leaving Elias standing in the doorway. For the next 3 days Elio avoided the mansion. He stayed at the penthouse, canceled meetings, stared at spreadsheets without seeing them. Every time he closed his eyes he saw Elias kneeling in front of Mateo, saw the boy's grateful hug, saw the life Elias had quietly built while Elio built towers. On the 4th day he returned home. Elias was in the study, dusting bookshelves. He didn't look surprised when Elio walked in. "I've been thinking," Elio said, "about everything." Elias set the cloth down. "And I want to help, not out of guilt, because it's right." Elias studied him for a long moment. "Help how?" "Tuition, housing, whatever he needs. I can set up a trust, make sure he's covered through college and beyond. No strings." Elias's jaw tightened. "And what happens when the board finds out you're funneling money to your gay butler's gay nephew? You think they won't connect the dots?" Elio laughed bitterly. "They already suspect. I'm not as careful as I think I am." Silence stretched between them. "I'm scared," Elio admitted. "I've spent my whole life building something I thought was unbreakable. But watching you with Mateo, I realized I've been protecting the wrong things." Elias stepped closer. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm tired of hiding. From them. From myself. From you." Elias's breath caught. "Elio." Hearing his first name in Elias's mouth felt like a door opening after years of being locked. "I've loved you for years," Elio said. "I just never had the courage to say it." Elias closed the distance between them. "I know." Elio laughed through sudden tears. "Of course you did. You always know." They didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, Elias simply rested his forehead against Elio's, breathing together in the quiet study. Later that evening Mateo came to the mansion for dinner. He sat at the long table, eyes wide, looking at the chandelier like it might fall on him. Elias sat beside him, calm as ever. Elio sat across, trying not to stare. After dessert Mateo excused himself to explore the library. Alone at the table, Elio looked at Elias. "I want to meet your sister," he said. "I want to try to fix what I can." Elias shook his head. "Some things can't be fixed with money or apologies. Then let me stand beside you while you keep doing what you do best, taking care of people who need it." Elias smiled, small, real, rare. "You're already doing that." The next few months were a quiet revolution. Elio came out to the board in a private meeting. He didn't ask permission. He stated facts. He was gay, he was in a relationship with Elias Thorne, and if anyone had a problem with that, they were free to leave. 3 members resigned. The stock dipped for 48 hours, then climbed higher than before. The world kept turning. Matteo moved into a small but modern apartment near campus, paid for by a scholarship fund Elio created anonymously. He still came to the mansion for Sunday dinners, still called Elias T.O., still looked at Elio like he couldn't quite believe this was real. Elias never quit being a butler, not completely. He still ironed Elio's shirts, still poured coffee the exact way Elio liked it. But now he did it with a small smile that said everything words couldn't. One evening, after Matteo had gone back to school, Elio found Elias in the garden, looking at the city lights. "You ever think about leaving?" Elio asked. "Doing something else?" Elias turned. "I like taking care of things, people, places. You." Elio stepped closer. "And if I asked you to take care of me, not as a butler but as a partner?" Elias reached up and touched Elio's cheek. "I already do." They kissed then, slow, certain, the kind of kiss that had been waiting a decade to happen. But the world outside wasn't finished testing them. A tabloid ran a story, "Billionaire'S Butler scandal. Is he using his position for personal gain?" The article twisted everything, suggested Elias had manipulated Elio, that Matteo was a prop, that the whole relationship was a PR stunt. Conservative pundits picked it up. Protests formed outside the company headquarters. Death threats arrived in the mail. Elio wanted to fight back with lawyers. Elias wanted to stay quiet. "They'll get bored," Elias said. "They always do." But Elio couldn't let it go. He scheduled a live interview, national television, prime time. The night before, he found Elias in the kitchen, staring at an old photo of him and Matteo. "You don't have to do this," Elias said. "We can weather it." Elio shook his head. "I spent too many years being silent. I'm done." The interview aired on a Thursday night. Elio sat in a simple chair under bright lights, Elias beside him, not as butler, but as partner. The host asked the expected questions. "When did you know? How did it start? What about the business impact?" Elio answered honestly. Then he turned to the camera. "I followed Elias home one night because I was afraid he had found someone else. What I found instead was a man who gave everything he had to protect a kid the world had thrown away. I saw love in action, not the kind you read about, but the kind you live. And I realized I had spent my life chasing power when I should have been chasing that." He looked at Elias. "Thank you for showing me what matters." The studio was silent. Then the host cleared his throat. "And Matteo?" "He's family," Elias said simply. "He's thriving. That's all that matters." The backlash came fast, and then it faded. New supporters appeared. Young people, parents, strangers who wrote letters saying the interview had given them courage. The company's stock stabilized. Life moved forward. 1 year later, Elio and Elias stood on the balcony of the mansion, watching the sunset. Matteo was graduating next month. He had chosen engineering, said he wanted to build things that helped people the way Elias had helped him. Elio slipped his hand into Elias's. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Elias shook his head. "Not for a second." They stayed there until the sky turned purple. And somewhere in the quiet, Elio understood that love wasn't about grand gestures or public declarations. It was about following someone after work, seeing their truth and choosing to stay. Was it worth risking everything for love? True or false?